much for joining us, Joe, today. It's been a pleasure to come here to Razorfish office in New York City. Now, you've had 25 years of experience in marketing and PR and branding. Tell us a little about your role at Razorfish and what exactly Razorfish does.
So here at Razorfish, I'm Group Vice President in charge of what we call strategic planning. So that includes both a heavily left-brained and also heavily right-brained approach to strategic planning for our clients. So it includes, on the right-brain side, account planning, which is the union of consumer insight and brand strategy. On the left side, it includes a very deep and analytical approach to measurement and measurement strategy.
Okay.
And then straddling the middle, it includes classical business strategy and ROI modeling, as well as connections planning, which is the science of putting experiences where they're likely to be most valuable for consumers. So I manage that group of specialists for the Northeast region.
And is this for a specific vertical, or is this for a specific medium, or it's across?
No, I mean, the heartbeat of Razorfish will probably always be digital. Razorfish was one of the very first, a lot of people would say it was the first digital pure play agency founded in 1995. And so I think our passion will always be digital. But as more and more of the world becomes digital, then it's very important to think about our role as extending far beyond the browser.
Right.
Right. More, there are more and more screens in the world, and the brands need to be able to exist on those screens in compelling ways. Right.
Interesting. Now, you also mentioned that Razorfish is owned by Microsoft.
That's right.
Have you done specific work for Microsoft, or what's the relationship like?
Yeah, well, we, before the purchase, actually, we served Microsoft as their agency, so for years, actually. So we've known Microsoft as a client for years before we've known them as a parent. And so we do continue to do a great deal of work for them. But our relationship with Microsoft is relatively hands-off in the sense that we're technology agnostic. We're not a Microsoft shop per se.
Right. Great. Now, Razorfish has also worked with a lot of airlines around the world, including Singapore Airlines, Northwest Airways, Alaska Air. What do you think is different about airline branding as compared to other brands? Yeah,
I mean, I think, you can't think about a brand separately from its industry. And the airline industry is a deeply, deeply complicated one. Has very rich challenges that are tough to solve. And so I think from a brand perspective, I think the airline brands are constantly running up against the fundamental problem of overpromising.
There you go. Yep.
And so, the great risk of airline branding is that you create an expectation that you can't actually deliver, because so much of the brand experience is actually outside the control of the brand itself. Right.
Yep.
So that, I think, is the fundamental issue that you have to deal with when you're talking about airlines.
Very interesting. Now, what are some of the unique challenges that you have encountered working with airline brands?
So I think aside from that one that I just mentioned, which is that ultimately when we talk about a brand,
right?
The least important part of a brand is how you talk about the brand and actually the logo of the brand and all that stuff. And actually, that in our view is quite trivial. The most important part of a brand is the experience that surrounds that brand. And so that is the richest area for us to explore. For an airline in particular, because so much of the experience of the brand actually begins far before you ever get on a plane. And most of it increasingly is a digital experience, right? If you think about it, most of huge and growing percentage of the population, their first experience of an airline is actually on their computer, not on the plane. And so that's where things either become charming or where they become disappointing. And, so I think that, in our work with airlines, you start with, generally speaking, you start with the website, right?
Right.
And I think the unfortunate fact with most airlines is that their websites were built during one era,
Yep.
And they're having to exist in this era. And things have changed fairly dramatically, with respect to consumer expectations of the web,
Yep.
just really over the last year and a half or 2 years. And I think it kind of used to be okay to have a fairly low-functioning, fairly pedestrian website.
Right.
And I think it's increasingly becoming not okay.
Yeah, right.
The web, I like to say the web is the most Darwinian medium in history because you're on an equal playing field with Nike and iTunes and everybody else, all those great brands. And just because you're a bank or an airline doesn't mean you can have a crappy website.
Right, right. Now,
even if it works. And so I think the bar, has been raised, and airlines, given the economic crisis and the oil prices and every other thing, that's sort of conventional part of the culture right now. Airlines have been hammered by that, and
Yep.
they've been having to function, in a really hindered state, I think.
right. Now, you mentioned that web is the most Darwinian system in the history. Now, which are some of the airlines which have actually trumped the system and managed to get the brand equity that they needed using the system?
I'm a big admirer of JetBlue. I'm a big admirer of Virgin America.
Right.
Virgin Atlantic generally, but Virgin America specifically. I think that those are two that have done a great job. And then, some sort of niche players. I'm a big fan of Gol in Brazil, actually.
Right.
I think that they have done a kind of an interesting spin on Southwest. Ryanair, surprisingly,
You're a fan?
Yeah, I'm a fan of what they deliver.
Right.
What they deliver. I flew Ryanair 4 months ago maybe, and I paid $29.
Yep. And you expect to be packed up. Yeah.
For $29, what do you expect? So they managed to deliver within a narrow range.
Right. Now, since you seem to be so familiar with the Brazilian brands, what do you think about Azul?
I haven't flown Azul yet.
What do you think about the strategies they've been using? Like, they had an online poll for their name, online poll for their colors, online poll even for their uniforms now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. Brazil is a very unique market, in that they have the highest voting rate of any country in Latin America. They have the highest usage of social media sites of any country in the world.
Largest, yep.
And I think that baked into the culture is an expectation that people will have a voice.
Yep.
And so I think Azul is an expression of the culture in which it lives, right? And I think that is very powerful and very smart.
Right, right. Now, you just mentioned your favorite airlines include JetBlue, Virgin America, Gol. Something interesting about these airlines is that they're all new. And that means that they had a fresh start and they had a nice clean plate to start from. What about legacy airlines? How can they retain freshness, a concept which you mentioned at Interact 2008?
Yeah, I think it's hard. I think it's quite hard. In working with clients,
right?
What I have discovered is that in many ways the biggest problems are cultural problems, right? And
internal culture, you mean?
Internal culture, right? And a fundamental either appetite or fear of change, and innovation. And I'm actually quite passionately loyal to American Airlines. But at this point, it has a kind of an underdog quality to my loyalty. I'm loyal to them because I'm a very senior flyer, and they treat me like a king.
Yep.
And it makes a huge difference. I fly 500,000 miles a year, maybe more, and being treated well, is a huge benefit for me at a very high touch level.
Right.
Because Lord knows, they have their website and otherwise is not best practice. So I think the legacy airlines have a lot of problems. They've got union problems. They've got legacy technology problems. They've got obviously a lot of issues that the new airlines that don't have all that baggage don't have to deal with.
Right. Now, how do successful airlines overcome these challenges, especially culture, internal culture? It's just deep rooted.
Yeah. Well, if you look, there are models for it, and it's hard. We also work with Ford, and it sometimes feels familiar actually, where you've got a big behemoth of a thing that has a lot of on the ground infrastructure that was built for one era. And is having a hard time making a transition to the next.
Right.
So I think our answer is always that we invent from the customer out. And what customers are expecting today is changing. And I think when I look at to me one of the most interesting things that I've seen happen recently with legacy airlines is I look at Americans' adoption of GoGo for online Wi-Fi, and that was the most kind of human-centered and valuable innovation that I've experienced on an airline in a while. Allowing me to be productive. On my coast-to-coast travel, I travel all the time back and forth between New York and LA and New York and San Francisco. And adding 5 hours of productivity, or fooling around, or whatever it was, was really transformational for me, and a signal that any airline that doesn't do that pretty damn quick is going to find itself obsolete.